forget the sound that Morte made when Viduna set it ablaze. The village people of Stelmužė encircled the effigy with saddened but determined eyes chanting their mantra. I wasn't a believer in this pagan tradition until Vidunas pressed his lit torch against the foot of the straw idol. The loud wailing moan that crescendoed into a fever-pitched scream will haunt me forever. You would have thought a woman was bound within it, being burnt alive. What strange primordial evil was this? Some moments make you question reality and your understanding of the world. Moments that humble you and remind you that you are smaller than a speck of dust in the grand scheme of the universe. Humans are too young to comprehend what other forces act upon this earth. I used to think folk tales and legends were simply products of the human imagination. A relic of the past, stories and fairy tales used to teach us lessons or attempt to explain phenomena that people at the time couldn't understand. Or nowadays, mere entertainment that you could find on Disney+. Let's admit it. Gods and goddesses of nature, dwarves and wizards, and witches all seem far-fetched. When was the last time anyone saw one in real life? Honestly, what knowledge does anyone indeed have about Halloween? It is now a capitalistic holiday in which people go out dressed in the most skimpy and bizarre costumes and party until the cows come home. Excuse the cheesy idiom. No one believes that they are warding off evil spirits. However, I now know that tales and traditions carry a different weight in different parts of the world. It all started some years back on Christmas Eve, or what the Lithuanians call Kūčios. My name is Miles, and I'm a career diplomat with the Department of State. I was studying Lithuanian and preparing for an assignment that would take me overseas to work at the U.S. Embassy in Vilnius. My Lithuanian language teacher, Daiva, with whom I had been doing online classes for over the past 8 months, suddenly got gravely ill. I remember it like it was yesterday. I received an email from the language school she worked for stating that Daiva could no longer be my teacher and that it may take several months to find a replacement. I was disappointed to hear this, as I was preparing to take my final oral proficiency exam in a few weeks. I asked my language coordinator, Lisa, for answers as to why my training schedule would drastically change at such a crucial time. Lisa wistfully disclosed to me that Daiva was terminally ill, with a rare disease that doctors couldn't diagnose. I was distraught. She seemed just fine yesterday when we Skyped. We even talked about our plans for Christmas, and she mentioned that she would be in Zarasai with her family in the village. The news saddened me. Daiva wasn't just my teacher. We had become friends over the last months. Lisa found and gave me Daiva's emergency contact information as I expressed that I wanted to pay my condolences to Daiva and her family. Luckily, I was able to get in contact with her husband, Jonas, and this is what he told me.
Unfortunately, Daiva is resting now, but we appreciate you reaching out. Our Kaimo GTV, doctor, is looking after her now. If you would like to visit, I will text you our address. We have masks to make and a pyre to build now. Viscus buscare.
It would all be good. What the fuck? Masks to wear and a pyre to build. What cryptid Baltic saying was that? Are they preparing to burn her body if she doesn't get better? Is she contagious, and do they want to reduce the potential spread of the disease? Maybe I'm thinking in extremes. He's her husband, and she's with her family. They wouldn't do that to her, would they? Weeks passed, and I reviewed old lessons Daiva and I covered in the past. And what do you know? I passed my oral proficiency with flying colors. I couldn't stop thinking about Daiva. If it weren't for her, none of this would have been possible. I would text her husband occasionally to check in on her. His answers were always vague and unsatisfying. He would say that she was good and that I should visit soon. I won't lie, it was kind of suspicious. All I kept thinking about was the Wicker Man, being lured and trapped by some Eastern European villagers and sacrificed for some unknown pagan tradition. What's the old saying? No good deed goes unpunished. Fuck that. There I go, thinking in extremes again. Eventually, I gave in. I booked a flight for the second week of February and went to Lithuania. After a 13-hour flight, I landed in Vilnius and hopped on a train to Zarasai. As I sat in my seat and looked out the window, I could only think about how beautiful the countryside was. Green meadows and trees covered the landscape for miles. Aš važiuoju į gamtą. That phrase always made me laugh. It translates as, I am going to nature. I understand the sentiment. Forest, plains, and marshes consume this place. After a 3-hour ride, I arrived late in the evening at Zarasai to be greeted by Jonas at the station. This was my first time seeing Jonas in person. He was short and heavy, with massive forearms, and couldn't be older than 60. He kind of resembled Danny DeVito. Oddly enough, he greeted me warmly, and then eagerly led me to his 1998 Skoda Octavia. I didn't expect that. His demeanor over the phone would always be so cold. As we rode to his sodyba, which is his house in a small village called Stelmužė, it was silent, almost eerie. Then Jonas decided to open up with,
You know, we are all glad that you came.
That statement put me on edge. Oh yeah, why's that? I responded hesitantly.
Well, we need an American for the pyre. Ashiokayu.
I froze for a moment. Why would Jonas even play like that? It's dark, and we are driving into the middle of nowhere. I changed the conversation, not to give him the impression that I was startled by his comment. How's Daiva doing? I said dryly.
Good. She will be better in a few days. Vidunas, our doctor, assured us of this.
What do you mean? I thought Daiva was terminally ill with an unknown disease.
Babe, she is gravely ill, but we know what sickness plagues her. You will see. You will learn something about Lithuanian culture and tradition that she could not have been able to teach you in your class. It just happened to be her time, unfortunately. This is something you will experience for yourself.
I was still confused, but maybe he was alluding to some traditional herbal medical treatment. I decided to put the topic to rest, for I will be seeing Daiva soon anyway. After another 15 minutes, we arrived at the sodyba. It resembled the Soviet-style wooden dacha with waist-level windows and thick weather-tattered doors. Overgrown grass covered in dew surrounded the house. I first noticed how tranquil and cold it was. A single candle lit the window on the left as we approached the sodyba. As Jonas and I entered the house, it was dimly lit with candles, almost as if a seance was being conducted. An older man greeted me. He introduced himself as Vidunas. He was the doctor that Jonas mentioned. He appeared to be in his mid-70s. Vidunas was frail and had to be about 6 feet tall. He was soft-spoken and had a very calm demeanor. But I must say he didn't look like a doctor, more like a shaman. He wore some traditional garb and walked around with a pole with an ending resembling the tip of a torch.
Labas, your Daiva student. How wonderful it is that you came all this way to see her.
Neraushka. It was nothing, is what I said.
Time is precious. And when one decides to share it with others, it is a thing that is to be respected and valued.
Vidunas explained that he has been staying with Jonas to care for Daiva. I was beginning to get anxious. I couldn't wait to see Daiva. She is the reason I came here after all. Where's Daiva? Jonas looked at Vidunas Vidunas gave him a slight nod toward a room down the hallway. I followed Jonas down the hall, and when we got to the room, Jonas paused and said,
"Do not be quick to judge."
When the door opened, I first noticed that Daiva was prostrated, face side up, with her legs and feet bound to each corner of the bed. She stared blankly at the ceiling, and her once brown eyes were now crystal blue with brown veins, almost as if they were remnants of Daiva's soul. I was horrified. What were they doing to her? Vidunas must have seen the look on my face and said,
"She isn't herself right now. Ye'ira obsesta."
What? Ye'ira obsesta means that she is possessed. Like what, I thought to myself. I don't understand.
"Yes, she is, but..."
Before Vidunas could finish his sentence, Daiva's body began to violently shake and pull on the restraints, curling her lips and savagely gnashing her teeth. She let out 3 chilling roars with a voice that did not belong to her frame. It was deep and demonic, with inflections that weren't human. Daiva, or whatever it was, spoke in slurred gibberish incessantly. Then, a spectral pale blue wraith-like body began to materialize and flicker, thrashing its arms and furiously shaking its head. Its movements were consistent with Daiva's, as if they were one. It was hideous. It resembled a woman with long brittle black hair, but its body was bloated with long and gangling limbs, and its skin was disgusting. It was riddled with open sores and burns all over it. Vidunas and Jonas rushed to grab what looked to be wooden animalistic masks hanging from behind the door, covered their faces with them, and then shouted,
"Yema, yema, begish yema. Yema, yema, begish yema. Yema, yema, begish yema. Yema, yema, begish yema."
They chanted this over and over again until Daiva began to stabilize. I stood in the doorway, petrified. What the hell did I just witness? An exorcism? After the commotion, Vidunas escorted me into the other room and sat me down. He then went on to explain.
Daiva's body is currently being occupied by More. The Poles know her as Marzana, the Russians call her Marina, Ukrainians Mara, and so on. The name doesn't matter. We all understand her to be the same. She is the goddess of winter, death, and disease. Every winter solstice, More comes alive and searches for a female vessel to host her spirit. It is unclear to us why she only targets women, but she seeks to occupy the body in an attempt to evade her burning at Uzgavenes. We here in this village practice the Romava faith, and fortunately for us, we know who More is occupying, and we will conduct the necessary ritual to banish her till next winter. Poor Jonas was home when his wife became possessed. He heard excessive banging and grunting in their bedroom after he returned home from the market. He wrestled her to the ground and then bound her with makeshift restraints before he came to get me. You see, we are fortunate. More typically possesses several bodies in winter, women and girls alike, draining them of their life force and leaving a trail of corpses. The gibberish you heard was not Lithuanian as you might have expected. It predates the current language of this land. More will die for us to welcome a bountiful spring and get our Daiva back. More wants to stay in our realm for as long as she can, but if she were to stay past Uzgavenes, Daiva's body would eventually succumb to the stress of the spirit and perish. The ritual is only to be done on the day of Uzgavenes, which is tomorrow. If we were to conduct this ritual earlier, she would have merely slipped from Daiva into another woman we would have to find. As much as Daiva is stuck with More is
is bound to her. Her dying on Ujgavenes will sap her of her strength until she returns next winter. Morde can never truly die. She is a season in the cycle of nature. We will need your help to erect the pyre tomorrow. The guest room is down the hall on the right. Try to get some rest. I will explain what we will need for the ritual tomorrow. I exited the current room and proceeded down the hall to the guest room. As I passed Daiva's room, I saw Jonas at her bedside with his head down, caressing her hand and praying. I opened my mouth to speak, but then caught myself and decided to let him be. I entered the guest room, which felt like a portal into a different era. It was antiquish, with stress-worn furniture and dingy lace curtains. This furniture was the real deal, unlike the cheap particle wood stuff they sell at IKEA. Anyway, I lay in the bed made for me, and my mind began to race after the initial shock wore off. How was I supposed to get some sleep after that? I had never seen anything like that. I heard about Ujgavenes before in my lessons with Daiva, but it seemed like a simple folk festival to welcome spring, a holiday similar to Halloween. Maybe this was all in my imagination, and I allowed Jonas and Vidunas to fill my head with pagan nonsense. Either way, Vidunas has been caring for her, and whatever he and Jonas did seemed to stabilize her. What's going on? Exhaustion finally seeped into my body, and I drifted off. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the warmth of the sun. As my vision became focused, I spotted Vidunas sitting in a chair in the corner of the room, reading. I jumped up, startled, and exclaimed, "What the? Were you watching me sleep?" "Not at all. The bed you're sleeping in was the one I was occupying the past few weeks, so I decided to sleep in a chair." "Oh, sorry. What are you reading? Preparing for the ritual later?" "Oh, no. I'm not concerned about that. I'm reading a recipe for blini. It's sad to say that I've always eaten it, but never made it myself. I will make it for us." "Thanks. That's kind of you, but please, don't feel the need. I don't have much appetite anyway. Please tell me about this ritual or whatever. How can I help?" I asked reluctantly. "First, you must go into the forest with Jonas and chop wood from an agilis, an oak tree. We will need it for the pyre. Some of the folks in the village have already assembled the effigy of Morde, which we will place on the pyre. I will gather gintere from folks in the town." "Wait, I'm sorry. Gintere?" "You didn't learn what ginteris is. It's ember. It's prevalent here. I will create a circle around the pyre once it's built. One piece of amber in front of the circle will be left out. This gap is where the spirit will enter into the effigy. Once it is bound to the straw idol, I will place this last piece of amber to close the circle and trap the spirit within the idol. We will then chant, Gema Gema, Bekish Gema. Do you understand this?" I half-heartedly nodded. I didn't know the direct translation, but understood it meant, "Winter go away." "Then, we will set it on fire and get our Daiva back." As I stand before the forest, I get it now. The thick forests and lush greenery in Lithuania almost look like another world, filled with different types of trees, vegetation, berries, and mushrooms. No wonder why Lithuanians have verbs for picking berries and mushrooms. Jonas and I ventured into the forest and began working on the first oak tree we spotted. As we headed back to the village with pieces of the kindling, the sun was already setting, and we noticed a gathering of several families by Jonas' Daiva. Festive music was playing and children were running about. Oddly enough, it was a celebration filled with merriment and laughter. Everyone dressed in odd costumes with some of the strangest masks I had ever seen. Some masks resembled the heads of animals, while some depicted what I would imagine to be demons. Even the children were wearing them. It was pretty creepy. Folks ran to grab wood from our cart and began building the pyre. One burly man carried the straw effigy that resembled a woman and impaled it into the ground in the center of the kindling. The town decorated the idol with women's wear and stuffed it with various materials. It even had hair, and a woman's face painted on it. I walked up to Vidunas as he finished the encirclement of the pyre. He spotted me and then walked towards me.
It's almost time,
he said, handing me one of the wooden ceremonial masks.
When the music stops and we begin chanting, don this mask and shout with us.
I accepted the mask, and he must have noticed me staring at the hair on the idol, because then he said,
Why yes, that is Daiva's hair. Not all of it, of course. Just a few locks of hair. Hair from Daiva creates a connection between the idol and the spirit More that occupies Daiva's body at the moment. When the ritual begins, More will be pulled from Daiva and trapped within the effigy and then sealed in by the ember.
As soon as Vidunas finished that statement, I turned back to look at the Sodiba and was shocked to see the wraith-like visage of More standing in the window of Daiva's room. It sent chills down my spine. I went to shout for Vidunas as he walked towards the other villagers, but on a double take, I looked again, and the figure in the window was gone. I tried to catch up to Vidunas as he began the ritual now that the sun had fully set. Vidunas held up his mask to garner attention from the crowd and signal for the festivities to cease. He donned his mask, and so did the rest of the villagers. I looked at the Sodiba and saw that Jonas was opening the window to Daiva's room from the inside of the house. Vidunas led the chant, and soon everyone started to follow along. I fumbled with my mask in my hand and then hastily put it on. I began chanting as well. The chant started low and then slowly began to roar, ringing out within the immediate area. From the Sodiba, demonic gibberish and groans began to resound in the room, and flickers of blue light became apparent. And in a flash, a stream of pale blue light beamed from the window onto the effigy. The hideous figure began to materialize fully, convulsing and wailing as if to pry itself free from the effigy. Some villagers momentarily stopped chanting, gasping, and crying at the sight of More, while others became more steadfast in their resolve, chanting louder and angrier. Vidunas briskly walked to add the final piece of amber to complete the circle, dropping it on the ground before the idol and kicking it into place. He then lit his torch and set the straw idol on fire. The wailing and cries of the creature were terrifying and almost deafening. Gurgling and monstrous wails thundered until finally, as the effigy was swallowed whole by the fire, a boisterous single inhuman cry pierced the night sky, leaving a hung silence. I can't explain how disturbing and terrifying that moment was. The demonic cries were haunting, but I sensed some sadness within them for some strange reason. More's final cry was filled with fear and pain. We all stared in silence at the burned idol, and I think we were all scared. Not just because of what we witnessed, but because we all knew she would be back next winter. A few years passed, and I'm ashamed to say that I turned down a position I was offered at the US Embassy in Vilnius. I know it was a waste of language training, but my mental peace is more important. I'm good here in DC for now. Jonas and Daiva are doing fine. I check in on them from time to time. She started to make a speedy recovery a few days after Ushkavinis. Brown eyes returned, and all she suffered was a minor case of memory loss. I'm glad she didn't remember anything after her possession. She is probably in a better position than I am. I'm still traumatized from that whole ordeal. I watch Lithuanian radio and television obsessively now, and every year, there are reports of more prolonged winters and several unexplained deaths. All aren't fortunate enough to have a Vidunas around, I guess. I can't help but to think, how often has this happened? How many times has Morty been found, burned, or drowned? I guess there is wisdom within old customs and traditions, some of which predate the logic of the modern world. Like I said before, moments in life make you question reality and your understanding of the world. Moments that humble you and remind you that there are other forces at work here. The more I think about it, it honestly scares me. Morte, a pagan goddess, is only one of many entities I deem fictional, something that only exists in folktales, and from what I witnessed, she is real. So I can't help but to wonder, how many monsters of legend and folktales are among us?